we should be asking the question before we develop or use AI in a particular scenario, is it appropriate to use AI in this particular scenario? Is it safe to do so? My role over the last sort of 6 or 7 years has been working to design and implement Accenture's own internal AI compliance program, which effectively is a safety system for the use of AI, and also working with clients to help them set up the same kinds of systems around governance and controls and the technical underpinnings, etc., to keep their use of AI safe. I think social media is a really illustrative example for us to learn from. And actually, if I think about Ibrahim's definition, I think the negative consequences, which most of us would recognize with social media, tick many of the boxes that you listed, within your definition. If I think about, mental health impact, I think about impact on elections, I think about propagation of extremist views and pornography. There's a pretty long list of things that aren't great about social media. Now, I'm not suggesting that this is intentional on the part of the social media companies, although the algorithms which are very effective at propagating this kind of content are very much intentional, but the consequences are unintended. I think the challenge is that there is no financial incentive for these organizations to curb these types of harms. And yet we still lack comprehensive regulatory controls for social media. And I was actually talking to a prominent regulator and politician last week about this topic and asked them, well, what do you think we should do for social media? And he said, well, I think the only real answer would be to ban it completely and start again from scratch. But obviously, that's not going to happen, right? Because once the horse is bolted, it's much harder to go back again. Which is why I think we need to act now in terms of AI. And I think we need comprehensive and rigorous testing before powerful solutions with such huge societal reach and impact are actually released. And I think this testing should be independent, and I think that AI should be licensed as a result of the testing. This wasn't the case with social media, but I think it should be the case with AI. We do it in transport, we do it for electrical goods, we do it in so many different areas of our life where there's a significant impact or potential impact on people. So why should AI be different? Now, I admit that this might slow things down a little bit, but is that necessarily a bad thing? I think it would be a bad thing if it were applied to one particular company. If one individual company were slowed down at the expense of others, that clearly wouldn't be good. And that's why I think that voluntary approaches are unlikely to work. But if you have regulation which applies across the board to organizations and imposes this kind of testing, then I think that would be very beneficial. Yes, we might have to wait a few months longer before we get the next version of ChatGPT, but is that actually a problem if we have much greater confidence in the safety of the system when it's actually released? And if I think about the companies that we work with today in the field of AI, but particularly top of mind is generative AI at the moment, the big concern for everyone is how do we deploy any solution safely? And there's huge amount of effort going into testing and trying to figure out ways to deploy the systems safely, and that takes a long time. If we had a lot more confidence in the underlying system, we would be a lot quicker in actually developing and deploying applications built on top of it. So I think there'd be a benefit actually across the board for everyone if much more safety were built in from the start. Having a culture of safety in an organization is so important. If I think about the airline industry, one of the amazing things about it is there is not a culture of blame if there's any accident. There's a culture of everybody comes together, intense scrutiny as to what went wrong, but not to point the finger at somebody, but to figure out why did it go wrong? How do we learn from it? How do we feed it back into the system? And that isn't necessarily the case in medicine in some areas because of the risk of liability and these sorts of things. And I think it's critical that companies and organizations and government breed this culture of safety first by design, exactly as Ibrahim said. That's absolutely critical that we build it in from the beginning.
Thank you.
We should be asking the question before we develop or use AI in a particular scenario, is it appropriate to use AI in this particular scenario? Is it safe to do so? And then we should be building in design right from the beginning. And I think that was consistent comment from, across the panel here, that we've kind of got ourselves into a situation where the only possible route in many cases now is to add the testing and add things on top of it, but we should go back to the beginning. I think it's also what Dame Angela McLean was saying yesterday about the rigorous scientific method being applied to the development of AI, which hasn't necessarily been the case up to now. I think it varies, there's huge geographic differences of opinion, which are also sort of cultural and social in nature. If you look across the world, different countries and regions are taking quite different approaches to regulation. You've got the EU, which is by far the most stringent. You've got the UK kind of somewhere in the middle, but vertical. And I think there's many people who might say that some kind of horizontal layer might be needed, a bit strong. They're moving to a stronger horizontal layer. The recent white paper was kind of more strong on the horizontal layer than the previous version. And then you've got the US, which is, broadly speaking, not regulated except in particular states and cities. I do think that standards have an important role to play, and I don't think we're going to influence much on the regulatory scene, but if we could get global agreement around ISO standards or other internationally recognized standards, then at least organizations would have a common standard, a common level to apply where they could have a higher degree of confidence. I mean, safety is a critical element, but we're going to have other, I guess it depends a little bit to Ibrahim's point about how do you define safety, but AI is going to have huge impact on society, the way we work, the way we need to be educated, many different ramifications, and I personally think they're going to come very quickly. So is that part of safety or not? I don't know, but I think we need definitely much broader debate and thinking about the impact of AI generally. I think regulation is really important. Safety shouldn't be optional. It needs to be regulated. And picking up on the comment from the gentleman there about foundation models, I understand the debate that says you should regulate the applications, but the problem is that with the way that foundation models have developed and the fact that they're not transparent and that people building on top of them don't understand and have access to the foundation model, if you don't regulate at that level, it makes it incredibly difficult for anyone building on top to be confident and safe. And if I draw a manufacturing analogy, we used to use mercury as a substance in many products. And that's banned now, or not used in most things because it's inherently not safe. And so that's something that I think is analogous in this case.